Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Global Data Systems webinar on Headache or No Headache, Why Managed SD-WAN is Better Than a DIY Approach in a Digital Transforming World. My name is Jamie Guidry, and I am Marketing and Communications here at Global Data Systems, and I will be providing some introductions as well as some housekeeping items before handing it over to Robert Guidry and Justin Getzinger. Before we get started, we respect your time, so we will not be running over 55 minutes. And as this is an interactive webinar, participating in our live polls and questions are highly encouraged. But last but not least, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a copy within the next few days. So now I would like to introduce our speakers today. Robert Guidry, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. Welcome, everyone. Just a brief introduction of myself. I'm Robert Guidry. I'm the Chief Technology Officer over here at Global Data Systems. Been here for a little over 22 years now. Had the enjoyment of working in the IT industry for 30 plus years. Spent quite a few years in the Air Force and some ISP services, and again been with Global Data Systems for a little over 22 years. My role here at Global Data Systems is really designing and delivering our technology stack toward our customers, meeting with our vendors, meeting with our customers, understanding what some of their business challenges are, and we work together to bring our solution sets to meet those business needs for our customers. I have alongside with me today Justin Getzinger. Justin, can you do a quick intro on yourself as well, too, please?
Yes, definitely. Morning to everybody that's joined. We appreciate your time and focus. And I've been joined GDS in August of 2017, based in Houston, Texas, primarily focused on business development, understanding the needs of our clients, their desired outcomes, and then how our solutions can help them achieve it. Prior to GDS, I spent 11 years in the oil and gas maritime industry, specifically focused on technology solutions for the industries. And it's been a very enjoyable process just to understand how technology can help companies achieve their success.
Thank you, Justin. So today we're going to cover a few different topics. Just kind of give you a highlight overview of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about some current trends and some challenges. What do we see some of our customers experiencing in their business networks? We're going to take a look at the overall SD-WAN solutions, talk about how it comes together, talk about some of the headaches in there. We're going to cover some of the components of why you might want to choose a managed service provider. We're going to talk about some considerations for the vendors, the carriers. We're also going to talk about some challenges that executives in our customer base might be experiencing and some of the outcomes that they're wanting to achieve. We're going to talk about a little bit about GDS and how we differentiate ourselves in the market, go through our proven process, and Justin will talk about that one. It's key that we also talk about an ROI as our customers are looking toward this. And then we're going to kind of wrap it up with a little Q&A session. So we would like to start off today by taking our first poll question. So our first poll question is, what network challenges has your organization faced within the last year? Is it some cybersecurity, maybe some incidents that you may have experienced? Are you looking to grow your business, so you're having to build out your network? Maybe there's some bandwidth, or maybe it's a combination of all those three. So while the poll is being run right there, Justin, just kind of a quick question. Why are your clients looking for SD-WAN solutions? What kind of challenges are they experiencing?
Yeah, it's very pertinent to understand what's driving companies to want to change how their business locations and their end users connect to the workloads that help them achieve success. So, short and simple, the traffic across client networks continues to increase. In some respects, we've seen the traffic double, in certain client organizations. So also, a lot of companies are realizing that they've gone out and they've purchased different business software and applications, but their network is preventing them from achieving the value proposition. So just understanding where they're at today having to manually log into devices to manage their network. It becomes a best effort, but it also becomes very labor intensive. So moving to a model self-driving is the primary focus.
Thank you, Justin. So we got our poll results in, and it's kind of equally balanced. We do see, quite a few cybersecurity incidents that were out there. Certainly, there's a need for more bandwidth, but about 43% of our responders said all of these things are relevant. So I think that's good. We have something to talk about today. So Justin, we're talking about this probably over the last quite a few months, but there's some current trends and challenges that we're seeing out in the industry where an SD-WAN solution can help businesses. Can you kind of care to give us some of your experiences? What are you hearing when you're talking to your customers?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, trying to understand how they're operating today. We live in a time now where there's a lot of digital transformation. There's some $10 slogans and words that get thrown around a lot in this industry, but the bottom line is that companies are embracing more software as a service. They're embracing public cloud applications. And what's happening is, in prior time, they were relying on applications and services that were running on servers at their office locations. They're now moving to a business model where they're relying on that being provided as a service, where those applications run on hardware located somewhere else. So understanding how to manage that, how to secure it, but also be able to provide a reliable end user experience so that end users can achieve what's needed. And then being able to connect those environments. What type of internet services, what type of carriers do companies need to embrace in order to achieve a holistic environment? This all points towards a company's network, how it's set up, and how it's managed.
Okay, thanks.
You mentioned, this is very much focused on deployment of a software-defined wide area network. Just kind of looking at some of the numbers in the industry, we're seeing adoption rates of SD-WAN continue to increase. Enterprise organizations are very much, if not already adopted an SD-WAN environment, they're in the process. Small to mid-sized businesses, because they continue to embrace hosted services. We look at the increase of companies that are adopting SD-WAN just from 2018 to 2020. That adoption rate's gone up 25%. One of the key areas that you and I are going to cover today, software-defined WAN solution, is a very complex project. There's a lot of stakeholders involved, and there's a lot of moving parts. Given the complexity of deploying a project like this, there's a lot of common causes for project failure. Some of the metrics that we have here, you can see what some of the higher percentage causes of project failure, everything from changes in objectives, not identifying where risk or outcomes. Also, potentially, having people that are managing that project that might be inexperienced or overloaded. So, Robert, given the complexity of deploying an SD-WAN, what are some of the key things to consider in the various stages of a deployment?
Well, hey, Justin, that's kind of a great question. So we're going to talk about a few things today. We're going to cover everything from, how do you even select your solution set? We're going to talk about some implementation, and we're going to talk about some post-implementation activities. So when you think about just, how do you select, kind of where do you start, right? So an overall, SD-WAN solution, if we kind of look at it this way, it's a combination of a few things, right? So we have our hardware, the vendor hardware that you can have out there that's going to connect your circuits. And there's quite a few, that are coming out there. We've got some new logos in the market. So you see some new manufacturers coming out. We're going to have some carrier selection. So depending on your locale, or, Are all your locations kind of in a regional area? Are you nationwide? Who do you pick to kind of help you go to market on that one? And then what type of connection do you need? Some fiber connections, broadband connections, some wireless connections in there as well too. So you kind of take a look at how do you put all of this together, and how do you find the right partner to help you, to bring this solution together. When I mentioned the hardware manufacturers, again, there's quite a few new ones that have come on the scene in the last, say, 4 or 5 years, and you kind of look at it this way: is okay, are they the right solution provider for me, right? Is their product standalone? Maybe can I also integrate it into my other activities, such as, for example, security? And certainly, if they're a new logo into the market, you also take a look at their ability to withstand and stay within that market to give you long-term support. So those are a lot of things that you have to take a look at, just in considering what you're wanting to do. And then when you kind of get into the implementation aspect of it, you can kind of see where the list of things that you'd have to consider. It certainly grows. We talked about the hardware that you're going to pick, and of course the licensing that goes along with it, maintenance contract that you're going to have to own along that process as well too. You have to take a look at all the circuits that you're going to offer, in your solution set. Is it all available from a single carrier? Is it going to be multiple carriers? Different technology types as well too. You might have different transport needs along the way. And oftentimes the contracts that you would have with your licenses and the contracts that you might have with your circuits are not congruent. So that's a challenge that you kind of have to kind of keep into a little bit of a balance right there. And then you have your rollout as well too in your implementation. Depending on the size of your organization, this could be a few months of a rollout to maybe a year and a half kind of a rollout. So you have to keep all of these things kind of aligned up well together. Then, of course, the actual deployments in the field, the scheduling and the turning up of the circuits and activation and testing. So there's a lot of things that you'd actually have to kind of take a look at during the implementation cycle. But hey, once you actually have it all set up and done, some things you have to think about is, how do you maintain it? Because we're going to get into that maintenance mode at this point. And you're going to take a look at how did you document this, right? Where's all my documentation? How do I keep it, current? What is my change management process? So if something has to change along the way, that we've documented it and effectively implemented that change. Of course, certainly hardware, software, assets, inventory assets. Again, I mentioned keeping the configurations in sync. That's certainly something important. And all the due diligence for maintaining a network, IP addressing schemes and things along those lines. And of course, all the different list of contacts from your hardware manufacturer through your carriers and so forth that you kind of have to keep all together for your support center to be able to reach out to individuals whenever issues may arise. So that's kind of a lot of things that kind of have to get orchestrated together. And there's some complexity in there. So Justin, I know you've mentioned this before. You have some customers that kind of have tried to do it themselves. There's kind of been some pitfalls along the way. Would you like to talk about some of maybe the pitfalls that they've run into as they're trying to orchestrate this outcome?
Yeah, it's a good point. Just looking at the complexity of selecting solutions, implementing it, and then supporting it after it's deployed. There's a lot of potential for hangups. Just looking at a couple of key areas that companies should kind of ask themselves. Do we have looking at our internal resources, it's very probable that most companies eventually could complete an SD-WAN deployment, but given the existing internal capabilities, would a company staff be better utilized for more strategic initiatives? That kind of goes towards, you start looking at the headcount differences between a small to mid-sized business or an enterprise. A lot of enterprise companies, they may have an entire floor of IT staff with dedicated project management teams to be able to truly deploy a solution like this. What we often find with small to mid-sized companies is that they're a bit thin in the IT staff and oftentimes overworked. So, the concept here of trying to be as strategic as possible. Another key area too is, when you just gave us a great overview of all the tasks that could occur, everything from selection to post-implementation. There's a lot of unknowns that could derail the budget. When I talk to our clients, we want to expand the conversation on budget, not just to focus on dollars, but to take a look at the human capital and the timeline to be able to complete deployment like this. What we've found is that small to mid-sized businesses, by aligning with an experienced MSP like GDS, we're able to deploy a dedicated team of certified project managers, specialized network engineers that not only can set realistic expectations for our clients, but also help them remain mindful of all the steps for an on-time delivery. The other component of this is overlooking or underestimating the complexity of networks. The first question every executive team should ask themselves when considering an SD-WAN is, should we continue to manage our networks within? It's a very meaningful and impactful question, especially if they're starting to embrace hosted solutions, software as a service or public cloud services. The complexity of our network is going to change drastically.
That's a good point. I got a little anecdotal story on that one. So, I'm part of a lot of forums, talking about some experiences that people are having. And when we're bringing in an SD-WAN solution, the key thing for the SD-WAN solution is providing availability and uptime for the end users, right? So you mentioned that there's certainly some complexity into it. There's a lot of magic that's happening behind the scenes and so forth. And a lot of times there's opportunity for a network failure to occur, but because of the resiliency of the SD-WAN solution, the end user really does not experience it at all. There was one of them in the forums that I noticed. There was a primary circuit failure at one of their branch sites, but it went undetected. The end users didn't notice because the software-defined networking, shifted over to a secondary service. So the end users did not notice the impact. It was great for the business, but the IT department didn't have the tool set available to them to be able to detect and remediate that failure. That location stayed on the secondary service for 9 months before they realized that it had failed over. And the only reason that they noticed it was the back office systems, the billing department noticed that they had an increase in their LTE usage bill. So what had happened is it failed over to a wireless solution. The users were not impacted, and it took quite some time before anyone in the organization actually even noticed that they were on a secondary location. They only caught it through the billing. So it's as you described, there's certainly some complexity in the network. Is designed to maintain the business, but there's some watchful eyes and some tool sets that need to be brought in there. So that's to say, SD-WAN is it's a great solution, but it's not a cure-all. So if you have problems within your network, you still need to be able to have some individuals that can monitor and detect those failures and recover from those failures as well too. So if we kind of take a look at it, there's certainly some considerations for some executives, right? So we up to this point we've been talking about some more of the technology pieces and stuff, and what it can do for the business. But what are some of the key considerations that you see from executives? What's kind of near and dear to their heart? What are they looking for?
Yeah, this is what really drives my activity on a day-to-day basis when I'm interacting with clients is we focus on outcomes. What are the desired outcomes? What's the desired target state that our customers want to get to? And once those outcomes are identified, that's really what's going to drive any solution development. The one that really jumps out to me is really, can I supply help desk staff 365 days a year, 24/7? A lot of companies may operate between 8 and 5 Monday through Friday, but they still want their network to remain healthy all the time. I know just from seeing support tickets come through for one reason or another, a lot of networks to choose to have failures at 4:30 p.m. on Friday. So Can a company be able to provide support around the clock without having to strain their staff? The other real key consideration that jumps out as well is just looking at timeline. Timeline for implementation. Our approach, and we find a lot of value in taking this approach, is work with our customers to identify their desired completion date, and then from that date work backwards and set milestones that have to be completed, and then be able to understand, is that desired completion date, is it realistic? Can we achieve the milestones necessary in the various steps to be able to complete the project by the desired date? The other key area too is just understanding what applications are going to need to be supported across the network, whether it's hosted, in-house, public cloud, just understanding the different workloads and how that traffic is going to traverse the network for an end user experience. Just kind of looking at the key thing here of outcomes, business outcomes. What we've found from a lot of our interactions with clients is that there's 6 real key outcomes that customers want to achieve. They tend to fall in one of these 6 buckets. So, hard cost savings. A lot of the vendors in the SD-WAN industry seek to highlight that a software-defined wide area network can deliver hard cost savings. What we've found is that if companies are relying on legacy type circuits, legacy type connections for their locations, we do typically see a substantial reduction of circuit costs. When it comes to growth enablement, how can a company rapidly deploy for new locations or to be able to support new applications? Ideally, companies want to be able to decrease provisioning time and have the ability to turn up services for their end users in days, not weeks or months. Reduction of risk and meeting compliance. That's been a very key one for a couple of clients recently. How can a company have advanced security features to be able to detect, identify, and then respond to any security threats that may become prevalent in their environment? Business continuity. We're based in Louisiana. We have a lot of clients along the Gulf Coast. Inherently, it was a busy hurricane season last year, and how can a company be able to have continuity and be able to fail over to secondary or tertiary connection services in the event that their primary provider has an outage? End user experience. When you look at efficiency and productivity, a lot of end users, they want to know that when they fire up their laptop to use the different applications, that it's going to function well. So understanding how a network can be designed to prioritize and shape bandwidth to be able to support those business critical applications. And then the core one that oftentimes our clients find this to kind of be a hidden but very desirable outcome is simplifying the billing process. Robert, we've got a couple of pretty good sized clients that the simplified billing approach really delivered some serious value to you. Would you be comfortable kind of sharing, what the impact of managing multiple carriers and being able to consolidate billing? What's that done for some of our clients?
Yeah, I sure can. So kind of what I was mentioning earlier when we were going through those considerations, there's one particular customer, they're a nationwide company. So their original approach was to, bring in carriers from the different markets, everything East Coast, West Coast, and so forth and so on. So with the number of locations they had, by the time they bring in, the WAN services, primary and secondary, and in some cases tertiary services, so even multiple carriers for a single remote office, what they realized was their back office was becoming inundated. So, I kind of talked about the back office experience earlier when they got a higher bill than expected. In this particular case, the workload in the back office, it just grew out of control. They had over 1,500 individual bills that were coming in from probably about 50 or so different carriers. So they actually had to staff up their accounting department that ingested all those bills and tried to cost allocate them back to the individual business units. So there's certainly some complexity there as well too. What we ended up being able to do for them is we brought in all of the circuits and all of the hardware and the licenses and everything on their simple, easy to read bills. As a matter of fact, for them, we do offer a custom billing option that we actually integrated into their accounts payable system. So not only we're sending this to them in a single bill, but we're also sending them to them electronically. They offer to us all their cost codes, so they're able to ingest that into their billing system and really simplified a back-end process that was really causing them some headaches. So like I said, oftentimes we're addressing a business need on the front end, but we also have to make sure that we deliver it all the way through, even billing and long-term support as well too. So that actually kind of takes us into our next polling question here. So it goes back to buying style. So what is your customers, your company's preference for procuring network services? Your connectivity, maybe your security, your management, things like that. Are you kind of more of a, do it yourself and kind of doing it in-house? Are you leveraging managed service providers? Are you going to your carriers, to do it? Or is, maybe you just don't know. I'd like to see kind of what's going on right there. And Justin, I guess while that thing is running, let's take a look at what are some of the, preferences that you see in your customer base. Have they tried to do it themselves and kind of switched over? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's, we kind of we highlight a good point here. There's a lot of clients that we've interacted with, especially in recent months, where they've been relying upon a single carrier. It's ideal to have a single carrier for all their locations, but being able to have the flexibility for business changes and growth. We find a lot of companies either rely on a billing management company or even just a single carrier. And oftentimes the options from that carrier could be a little too rigid or limited to allow for the type of growth that they want. Companies are continuing to embrace managed services providers. What we've seen there is, there's a very diverse portfolio of managed services providers that are now available to clients. So just, understanding, what a company would want to focus on from MSPs, what type of MSP would be the best fit for them. I think we are continuing to see that companies are either aligning with an MSP or a carrier so that their in-house staff can be a little more strategic.
Okay. So we got some results back from our polls. So about 20% are kind of trying to do in-house. As Justin said, we tend to see larger organizations, enterprises, kind of doing that. They have 60% going through the managed service provider world. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying there. A lot of people are going that way, and there's some people that are going directly to their network carrier. And we typically see that when an organization has all those locations kind of put in a particular region, so they could go possibly to a single carrier that can provide them all of their services as well too. Yeah,
these results aren't they're not surprising. When you walk into the grocery store in the ice cream section, there's like 800 flavors of ice cream that you could choose from. If you were to kind of put yourself in the shoes of being a business owner, Robert, what are some of the common barriers that executives may face when it comes time to try and align with a managed services provider?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we took a look at the implementation cycle of an SD-WAN, a similar approach and analysis can kind of come to play when we take a look at choosing an MSP. So one is really finding the right MSP for you. And part of it, really, the first thing is the size of your company. You talked about, small and medium business, the mid-market and the enterprise. So you take a look at really what your needs are and what is your MSP set up to deliver, right? So, for example, if you pick a an MSP that's designed for enterprise networking in your small, medium business, or possibly even mid-market, what might end up happening at that point is, hey, look, you've hired a guy with some great capabilities, but he doesn't have the personal touch that you might need, right? So what you'll end up doing is, they're just too big for you. You're not going to get the attention you need. Conversely, you might pick maybe a startup MSP, right? So they might not be very mature in all of their services. Might be able to provide your SD-WAN, but maybe your overarching needs won't be met. So finding the right size of MSP for you, what services do they deliver, and are they a match for your style of business? That's critically important. That's not necessarily a technical conversation. That's more of a business arrangement conversation. But we also talk about, what we see is when you pick your MSP, you want them to provide more than one service for you, right? So you might be managing your SD-WAN, but what are some of the additional services that would maybe lie on top of that? For example, some, voice services, to enable, voice and collaboration at all your locations. And of course, another one is really security. So, there's been, quite a explosion in that whole area. I'm pretty sure you've got a couple of talking points right there on the security services, right, that the customers would need.
Yeah, definitely. As companies, typically in the small to mid-sized business environment, typically a lot of the companies procure security services in a very reactive manner. If you look at the landscape of security vendors and solutions in the market just in North America, there's over 3,000 companies that offer different types of solutions. And when we sit down with clients to understand their current state, what they're relying on today, there's a good bit of best in class but siloed solutions from numerous vendors. And so, one of the key things that a lot of our clients are focusing on is how can I find a partner that can consolidate some of these services in a more holistic way? How can I find a partner that is allowing me to establish, personal relationships with my MSP that understands my business and is able to help me with my overall technology roadmap? That's a very prevalent point to make. Kind of glad you brought it up.
Yeah. So, for example, in this case, you would take a look at integrating, the network security that's part of the SD-WAN solution, possibly with maybe endpoint security, so you have a more holistic approach to, security. And then when you're talking about security at the customer level, you absolutely have to pay attention to security at the managed service provider level. What is their security maturity level, right? How are they protecting themselves, which in turn actually protects the customer? So those are certainly some questions that worth being asked and answered. One of the ways to actually tell right off the cuff of, where does your MSP sit is what type of certifications do they have? So you're looking for something like a security operations center certification. So you'll typically hear in the industry it's a SOC 2 type 2 audit, where they have their processes that are not only well established, but they're independently tested through third-party auditors to make sure, the network is secure, the data is secure, their processes are proven, time tested. So those are extremely important. The other thing to take a look at from an MSP is the diversity that they can offer, right? Do they offer just one type of circuit? Do they, partner with a carrier and say, okay, I'm just going to sell this type of service from this carrier? Or do they have the relationships and the product breadth to cover many different transport types across many different regions? That's really the benefit of picking a security managed service provider that has those relationships to bring in a complete solution set and still get it to you on one single bill instead of you having bills from all of those individual locations. So when we take a look at it, so we look at, the GDS difference, right? So, how does GDS bring this solution set together for our customers? So, Justin, tell me what have you been experiencing in delivering solutions to your customer?
Yeah, I think, we talked about the diversity of the MSP landscape, and, every managed services provider has various areas of the market that they focus on. What I've found is that at GDS we've established very proven processes, and then we tend to stay well within our lane of strengths. One of our key strengths, as you kind of we look at, what all is involved to deploy a SD-WAN solution. Once that solution gets turned to the implementation phase, GDS employs a dedicated team of project managers that are ITIL and PMP certified, and that project manager begins to establish a one-on-one relationship with our customer. They bring that customer from through the full implementation life cycle, even up to the point where it gets handed off post-implementation to monitoring and support. We tend to find that project management approach for our clients is a huge differentiator. One of the other key things you just mentioned about common barriers for choosing an MSP. Over the years, GDS has been able to establish a very diverse set of WAN transport options, and then bring all those transport options into a single network backbone that enables our clients to have the carrier diversity and transport diversity that lets them be successful. We also just covered our approach to billing. There's a lot of hidden value our customers find when they align with GDS, and being able to have a customized invoice that simplifies their back office approach to processing bills, and allows that back office staff to be able to be more strategic in their efforts. And the next thing that we're going to cover here, and one of our biggest differentiators, is when we engage clients, we're not just shooting from the hip. We take a very, very proven process. We've got, there's 7 phases of our process. The GDS Compass, I spent 11 years with a maritime company before joining GDS, so I can enjoy that we've labeled it the Compass. Ultimately, our Compass allows both us and our clients to navigate each and every engagement in a very organized way. We sit down and initially have a foundations call, understand what's happening in the client's business environment, what are some of the common challenges or issues that they're hoping to solve. From there, we then navigate into a vision meeting to be able to bring together any key stakeholders that could be impacted by deploying a solution, understand what's important to them, what are the critical success factors. From there, we then engage our solutions architects, and we have an assessment meeting or an assessment call just to take a look at current state versus target state from a technical perspective. Being able to start to identify how certain solution sets can help the customer achieve their outcomes. The real fun phase and the enjoyable phase, as each of these phases are completed, we're looking to make sure that we've truly captured the necessary information to move into the next phase. The real enjoyable one for us on the sales side is when we start to see the technical solutions conceptualize and align with the needs of the clients. Then we move from there into our implementation phase. What kind of time and energy is going to be necessary, what type of human capital, budget, the overall decision-making process. And that way there, when we get to our proposal, the phase of our process, our customer is going to be able to understand, how we've identified their desired outcomes, what type of technology is going to help them achieve those outcomes, and ultimately they can make an informed decision. This proven process is the daily regimen for our sales team, and we find that one of the key outcomes is that as we navigate from each phase, we're verifying that there's merit in furthering the conversation. Oftentimes we may get to a point where us and a client realize that for one reason or another, either timing is not right or we might not be a fit, and that's actually a valuable outcome. So just kind of looking at, these different phases, Robert. Ultimately, a customer wants to understand, the capital investment. Where can they actually achieve a return on investment? How can they achieve a return on investment by deploying SD-WAN?
Right. And probably one of the key things is how do you establish that ahead of time, right? So I think what I saw you describing there in the Compass process is a lot of those steps were specifically designed to address the complexity that we talked about earlier about picking the right product, implementation cycle, deployment cycle, support cycle. So it sounds like in the front end we're bringing everything together, and part of it is the justification to do it. So one of the things we establish right up front is what are the target states, right? What do we want to get to? Where are we today and how we get there? So we need to take a look at all the cost and the bandwidth options that you're going to have in there. This next one, the security and compliance mandates, this is really, really critical. If you're a retail organization and you have PCI compliance, or maybe a healthcare organization, you have HIPAA compliance, making sure that those compliance aspects are embedded in your network solution set is very important. You don't have to do that kind of after the fact. Getting with the solutions architects, we actually whiteboard out what is your current state of your network, where do you want to get to, and we oftentimes have to take a look at an implementation strategy that says, okay, what are our transitions that we need to get from where we are today to where we want to be. Typically, it doesn't happen all at one time, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight. So we want to set that future vision. We want to make sure that there's business continuance in there. We talked about where the applications exist today. They're in cloud services. So any type of network disruption makes that branch office, for example, just completely isolated from the business and not effective. So what we want to do is capture all of that information, put together that timeline, and we also want to make sure that the timeline has an implementation schedule that meets the goals of the organization and the budget as well too. So when we kind of take a look at what GDS does in this whole process, we want to make sure that you get your network up and installed faster. We want to reduce the cost and complexity for our customers in doing so, and lower risk by bringing in on the front end what are our compliance and security requirements as well too. So getting into poll number 3, we want to take a look at what are your current plans for an SD-WAN. You've already implemented it, maybe you've tried to implement it, but hey, I need a lifeline. I need call a friend here. You're looking at it in the next 3 to 6 months or 6 to 12 months. And I guess Justin, while they're answering some of those questions, and before we get into the Q&A, what have been some of the typical timelines that you've seen from an implementation cycle for some of your customers?
Yeah, so as an example, I had a client 2 years ago that we deployed a SD-WAN solution. There were 8 locations, including the headquarters and the data center. And so, with 8 locations, 600 employees, being able to orchestrate all the circuit deployments, hardware implementation and install and commissioning, it took right at about 6.5 months to deploy it in a very organized fashion without impacting operations of the business. As you start to understand, 8 locations, start looking at some clients that could be 20 or more locations, 40 locations. That implementation schedule, could definitely stand to extend into, a year or more. So, I think from just understanding the breadth of the project and the deployment, it's not something that happens overnight.
Okay. So some quick poll results right here. So we've got about 40% that's looking forward in the next few months, another 40% in the 6 to 12 months, and another 20% that there's no plan set up at this time. So anyway, just kind of some interesting things. I would have thought maybe we would have had some of them who have already tried implementing it themselves at this point. So, but so one of the things we want to do is talk about before we get to the Q&A, the wrap up of the Q&A, the GDS experience, right? So one of the things we really strive to do, this is part of our mindset on a day-to-day basis. we want to make sure that we securely connect any user, any device, anywhere, anytime over any transport. So our goal is to provide connectivity, that uptime for the users, but in the most secure way. So whether at the branch office or the headquarters location, maybe even on a tablet out in the field, when we wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, this is kind of our core focus. So when we kind of take a look at a quick recap before we get into the Q&A, there's some major pillars here that we want to talk about. What are our objectives here? So really, the first and foremost one here is the uptime and application availability. And when I say that availability, security is a component of that availability. If you have a security attack that takes down your network, well, then it's not available. So not only are we considering that uptime, making sure that that user can always reach their application, but make sure that there is no security incidents that will come in and have a negative impact on those users. In order to do that, you have to have visibility and management. I mentioned a little bit earlier, because of the resiliency of an SD-WAN network, you may experience a failure in the network that the users just do not feel. They do not have a negative impact, but they have to have visibility and management of those individual components to make sure that the trouble spot has been identified and remediated so you can get back to your primary services. And then, of course, things that we talked about quite a bit was the complexity of telco billing. So there's a lot of things to talk about that we talked about, and that one is, bringing all those bills into a single bill. Something we didn't talk about, I want to put out there too, is oftentimes as we're going through our projects, we find legacy telco services that are still in place, possibly even from a previous deployment cycle. There might be some circuits where the end of the project, they didn't disconnect the old circuits, so they're still sitting in place, and the business office, the accounting office, is still getting those bills and paying for them. So we find out that as well too. When we take a look at all of the nuances of rolling out a project, we're working with our customers, establishing what do they have today and where they're going. So as we transition them to the future state, we're able to give them some information back to say, okay, these are the old services that can now be terminated. So it really helps with making sure we realize the return on investment for our customers. So quickly, we want to make sure that we have a secure, high availability connectivity for our customers to reach their applications. So kind of at this point, I want to open it up to a Q&A. If there's any questions that are coming in from the audience members, you can just put it in the question and answer session. Now it'll pop up. And I think, Justin, you might have had one or two of them already. Was there some questions that were coming in?
Yeah, I think, I had one come through from a client yesterday, that they planned on jumping on the webinar. And, what they were curious about is, they pretty much told me that, you can go down to Walmart and buy SD-WAN hardware nowadays. There's so many different manufacturers that provide various flavors of SD-WAN capabilities. When GDS was going to market and looking at hardware, is there a certain hardware model that GDS really focused on for delivering to our clients?
That's a great question. So one of the things we take a look at is, one, trying to shield the customer from having to go through the vendor selection process from all the different hardware stuff out there. So what GDS brought together was the strength of the partnerships that we already have today. So Cisco is one of our core ecosystem partners. So we've established that partnership with them and utilized their solution to go to market. There's a couple of reasons really to do that. So one, it was a proven product for us, right? But more importantly than that, it provided a very quick way to get our customers up to speed and get their projects implemented at a quicker pace, because it's a solution set that all of our engineers and our project managers and account managers were already familiar with. So that shortened the learning curve right there. And certainly the support side of it. You cannot understate the importance of having that support. So you've got a proven product, you've got a strength of a manufacturer within the industry that is combined with the GDS ability to bundle all of those things together and provide an outcome to the customers. So looks like another question just popped in there. Let's see, what are the benefits and efficiencies of moving to an SD-WAN environment with GDS as an MSP when it comes to office moves and remote users in a SaaS environment? So that's a great question. So one of the things that we've noticed is that timeline for implementation. I'm going to pick out, not only the original project, but what happens when an office needs to move. It could be because of acquisitions. Some of our customers, their growth model is through acquisition, right? So they might be buying another company where they need to quickly, add 5 locations to their network. So as we bring in those new locations into the network, we identify the needs of those particular remote offices. We bring in the right bandwidth, for the applications that are standards out there to be supported. But sometimes we've got a very short window to be able to do this. Our solution set allows you to at least get some services through wireless connectivity, generally within about 48 hours. So we can turn up a remote office in about 48 hours, while the long-term, circuit build-out might need to come into play. So we really strive to make sure that they are connected quickly. Now, when it comes to a SaaS environment, we have the ability to take our customers and bring them into a network that is secure and protected, and we can deliver that all the way up to the cloud provider. So if your application is in Azure or AWS, you don't have to go through the public network, public internet to get to Azure or AWS. We can actually keep you guys on a secure network and deliver you to a private connection into those cloud environments, to where you reduce, which we call your attack vector. We talked about security earlier, making sure that the solution can see what's going on in the network. But we also want to be able to shield the network as much as possible for any type of outside attack. So our overall solution is, by its design, we've reduced the attack vector from threats coming in from the internet.
Yeah, so
I
it
hope that
sounds
helped
like
answer that question there.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like, a SD-WAN, our GDS SD-WAN solution allows for rapid scalability, but also being able to minimize the provisioning, the manual provisioning activities.
Oh, absolutely. And again, you stated this a little bit earlier. We've got our project managers, our solutions architects, our implementation engineers, and our account managers that live and breathe this on a daily basis, where an organization that might be approaching this, it's maybe not in their DNA. Their core focus could be finance or healthcare and so forth. So they would have to go through a long process of ramping up to understand all of the nuances of this. So it elongates their deployment cycle and introduces risk. So you partner with the company who does this on a daily basis, and you get to market quicker and safer. So as we kind of getting ready to wrap up, I just kind of want to mention, if you have any additional questions or you'd like to talk about a particular scenario, you can just reach out to us. Let us know. There's an option on the screen and say, hey, contact me for additional questions, and we'd be happy to get back to you directly. So I guess in closing like this, Jamie, I'll turn it back up to you for closing.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Justin, for your time today. It was a great presentation, and I hope everyone gained some information around SD-WAN and how it can better your business. But I wanted to do is take some time to remind you of and that we hope that you took advantage of our webinar offer of our 50% off network protection assessment. And as I see, we have some people who have responded to be reached out after this webinar, so please be on the lookout for some communication there. But this concludes our webinar, and thank you again, and we hope you all have a nice day.